You know that feeling, don't you? Whether it's trying to stick to a new personal habit, like actually getting to the gym at 6 a.m., or
Yeah.
wrestling with a brand new software system at work.
The one that's supposed to make everything easier.
Exactly. And you understand the need for change. You might even want to embrace it. But something deep inside just, well, it resists. It feels like your brain is wired to stick to routines like a fly to a sticky note.
It's a universal human experience, that feeling. Getting stuck or feeling pushed against your will, isn't it? That inherent pushback, that resistance is precisely what we're going to dive into today.
And that deep-seated resistance is exactly what we're peeling back the layers on today in the deep dive. We're exploring psychology of change resistance, why it's hard to adapt, and how to overcome.
We've looked at quite a bit of material, haven't we? From, psychology journals to business insights.
Yeah, trying to uncover the surprising psychological, biological, and even organizational reasons why embracing change often feels like such an uphill battle.
And critically, we're not just here to explain why it's hard. We're going to reveal practical, actionable strategies. Things you can actually use to not just navigate that resistance, but to truly understand its roots.
And maybe even transform it into a powerful force for positive momentum.
That's the goal.
We'll explore everything from our core human instincts, the deep wiring inside our brains, to complex organizational dynamics.
And we'll also pinpoint the critical role of things like leadership and emotional intelligence in turning that natural resistance into an engine for adaptability within ourselves and within our teams.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Why does change so often feel like such a struggle? Where does it start?
It starts with something incredibly fundamental, something deeply ingrained within us. It's about how our brains are built.
Right. I often think about my morning routine. If I had to consciously think about every single step, from hitting snooze to brewing coffee, I'd be exhausted before I even left the house.
That's a perfect analogy. Our brains love autopilot.
It makes you realize how much we prefer it. But what happens when that autopilot gets abruptly switched off by some change?
Well, that's where the trouble starts. Research, like some done at MIT, actually shows our brains form these incredibly efficient neural circuits to automate routine behaviors.
So it's not laziness, it's efficiency.
Exactly. It isn't just about convenience. It significantly reduces the need for conscious decision-making, which, like you said, conserves a lot of mental energy. It's our brain's way of being efficient.
So when change disrupts those automated processes, it's not just inconvenient, it's actually triggering a kind of biological alarm.
Precisely. Our amygdala, sometimes called the brain's drama queen, it activates during times of uncertainty and change.
Ah, the amygdala.
Yeah, it perceives this disruption as a potential threat to our safety or stability, kicking off that primal fight-or-flight response.
Fight or flight over a new software system.
It sounds dramatic, but on a neurological level, uncertainty is a threat signal. There's fascinating research indicating that individuals with a larger amygdala volume tend to exhibit higher trait anxiety and show more resistance to new situations.
Wow.
So what often looks like stubbornness or a bad attitude can actually be a very real, very physical reaction rooted in our brain structure.
That's truly eye-opening. So it's not just a mental block, it's baked into our biology. Okay, beyond that though, what other psychological and emotional drivers are at play when we resist change?
Well, one of the biggest is simply the fear of the unknown. It's pervasive.
Makes sense.
When you're faced with a new process at work, or even just like considering switching coffee brands, that uncertainty, it generates anxiety. Uncertainty about job security, how your role might change, what the experience will feel like.
So we cling to the familiar.
We naturally prefer what's familiar and predictable, even if the alternative promises to be objectively better.
We see this every day, don't we? Think about consumers sticking with familiar brands, even when new ones offer clear advantages. It's that comfort with the known.
Exactly. And closely related to that is something psychologists call loss aversion. This is a really profound insight.
Loss aversion. Tell me more.
It basically means humans are more motivated to avoid losses than they are to acquire equivalent gains. Kahneman and Tversky, the Nobel-winning psychologists.
Yeah, I know their work.
They famously found that we often value potential losses approximately twice as much as equivalent gains.
Twice as much. That's huge. So let's take that work example again. A new CRM system comes in, promises to save everyone 30 minutes a day eventually.
Right.
But that initial 2-hour training session and the hassle of switching over, That feels far more costly psychologically than the future benefit feels valuable. Is that it?
Absolutely. The immediate pain or inconvenience of that 2-hour disruption is felt much more acutely, much more strongly than the promise of future efficiency.
It's like our brains are saying, nope, too much effort up front, even if it's better later.
Pretty much. I'd rather stick with my current, slightly inefficient system than go through the very real discomfort of learning a new one.
And speaking of how our minds can play tricks on us, cognitive biases also come right into play here.
Ah, yes, biases, like confirmation bias, where we look for stuff that proves what we already think.
Exactly that one. It's like when you're thinking of buying a specific type of car, suddenly you start seeing that car everywhere.
Oh yeah, that happens all the time.
The number of those cars on the road hasn't actually changed. Your brain is simply now registering them because they're relevant to your focus.
Okay.
Well, the same mechanism applies when you're already resistant to a proposed change. You'll unconsciously seek out and amplify every piece of information, every little hiccup that supports your existing skepticism. So our brains are actively trying to prove ourselves right, even when it might be leading us down a less optimal path.
Wow. And I imagine that feeling of losing control must be a huge factor too. Feeling like change is being forced on you.
Oh, it's enormous. When change makes people feel like they're losing autonomy over their work, their environment, or even just their daily tasks, that perceived loss of control can trigger powerful resistance.
We like feeling in charge of our own stuff.
We crave stability, and familiar patterns and routines provide that. Disrupting them requires significant discomfort and effort. And that effort can lead to emotional and psychological drain, especially if the benefit isn't immediately obvious or compelling.
And maybe even deeper than that. What about when someone's work is really tied up with their identity, their sense of self-worth?
That's a critical point. Think of, say, a master craftsperson whose entire identity is intertwined with their unique skill set.
Any change that threatens their status, their established expertise, or even just their relationships within the team, that can trigger profound resistance. It's no longer just about a job function. It feels like an attack on who they are.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So we've got the individual brain stuff, the emotional drivers. But it's not always just about the individual, is it? There are bigger organizational things at play, too.
Definitely. Moving beyond individual psychology, there are significant organizational and perceptual barriers. Some sources talk about something called the moral force.
The moral force, what's that?
It's this deep-seated belief that the tried and true, the status quo, is somehow morally correct or inherently better just because it's familiar.
Oh, the we've always done it this way argument.
Exactly. That mindset can make it incredibly difficult to shift perspectives, even when you present compelling evidence for change.
And that often ties into a broader lack of trust, doesn't it? If employees don't trust the leaders making the change, or they doubt their motives or competence,
They're far more likely to resist.
absolutely. I saw one statistic suggesting a surprisingly high percentage of employees don't fully trust their managers. When trust is low, people naturally adopt a defensive posture.
Which is a major barrier right from the start.
It creates what some sources call an information vacuum. Managers might have all the context, the why behind a change, but if that's not shared transparently and clearly.
People fill in the blanks themselves.
Exactly. Employees will fill those gaps with their own interpretations, and often those interpretations are negative.
Can you give us an example? Like that auto worker scenario.
Sure. Imagine an auto worker on the shop floor. Management introduces a new reporting line for collaboration, seeing it as vital for efficiency, maybe cross-functional synergy.
Sounds reasonable from their perspective.
But to that worker, without clear communication and trust, it might look suspiciously like micromanagement. Or worse, maybe preparation for redundancies. Their interpretation, their evaluation of the change drives their resistance.
Different perspectives based on different information, or lack thereof. Precisely. And then there's the classic, if it's not broken, don't fix it mindset.
Ah, yes, that one's very common.
People genuinely believe there's no need for change if the current situation seems satisfactory or, just okay. But sometimes external factors, increased competition, market shifts, new sectors, they necessitate change even when things feel perfectly fine internally.
Ignoring those external pressures is just kicking the can down the road, really.
It's a recipe for future problems. And remember, it's not always just individuals resisting. Groups or whole departments can push back.
Why would they do that?
Well, maybe the change threatens their resource allocation or their power or just their established way of operating. Or perhaps the overall organizational culture is just very status quo oriented, very conservative, making any new way of working feel deeply uncomfortable for everyone.
Okay, so we've really broken down why change is so often this uphill battle. Biology, psychology, organizational factors. It's complex.
It really is.
Now for the exciting part.
Yeah.
How do we turn the tide? How do we actually cultivate adaptability and overcome this resistance?
Right. Well, one of the most powerful tools, especially for leaders navigating change, is emotional intelligence, EQ.
EQ, we hear that term a lot. It's not just a soft skill, is it?
Not at all. It's a critical driver of effective change management. It's about recognizing, understanding, and managing your own emotions, and then extending that understanding to others.
So what are the key parts of EQ? How does it help leaders specifically?
The core components are usually seen as self-awareness, really understanding your own feelings and how they impact you, self-regulation, managing your impulses, your reactions, motivation, using your emotions to achieve goals, empathy, truly understanding and sharing the feelings of others, and finally, social skills, building relationships, managing conflicts effectively.
Okay, so a leader with high EQ, how would they handle, say, a big company restructuring differently?
Well, instead of just announcing the changes, an emotionally intelligent leader would communicate openly. They'd acknowledge the fear and uncertainty people are likely feeling.
Address it head on.
Exactly. They'd directly address employee concerns with empathy. This approach helps build trust. It enhances communication, improves decision-making under pressure, and fosters genuine collaboration because the team feels understood and supported, not just dictated to.
That makes a huge difference. Beyond individual leadership EQ, what about broader strategies? How do you drive change across an organization?
Clear and transparent communication is paramount. It's not enough to send one email and call it done.
Definitely not.
You need constant multi-channel communication. Think town halls, newsletters, one-on-one check-ins. You need to keep explaining the why behind the change, the benefits, and even be honest about potential challenges.
Sharing the context.
Leaders must proactively share the context, help people understand that decisions are necessary, not just arbitrary whims. This safeguards against that dangerous information vacuum we talked about.
Because if you leave a vacuum, it gets filled with rumors and fear.
Right. Another powerful strategy seems to be involving employees in the process itself. Oh, absolutely. When people participate in shaping the change, they develop a sense of ownership and commitment. It stops feeling like something being done to them.
So how do you do that practically?
Encourage input. Use workshops, focus groups, feedback sessions. You can even identify and establish a network of change champions.
Change champions?
Yeah, employees who are enthusiastic about the change and can act as ambassadors, advocates, and sources of support for their peers. Studies consistently show that participation significantly reduces resistance. It leads to greater readiness, acceptance, competence, and trust.
That makes sense. Get people on board early. Now, I've also heard of a tactic called co-opting resistant individuals. That sounds interesting. Can you explain that?
It's a fascinating strategy, almost counterintuitive. Instead of trying to sideline or ignore resistant individuals, you might intentionally give them central roles in implementing the change.
Really? You put the resistant person in charge?
In a specific, managed way, yes. By doing so, you can often gain their support, channel their energy constructively, and sometimes even transform them into the change's most passionate advocates. They understand the pitfalls so they can help navigate them.
That's a truly strategic move. Okay, and we know change is hard work. Stepping out of comfort zones is exhausting. So support and training must be absolutely critical.
Non-negotiable. Organizations have to provide adequate training, resources, coaching, mentoring, whatever people need to develop new skills and adapt.
It's not just technical skills though, right?
No, it goes beyond that. It's about empathetic engagement. Managers need to actively check in on their team's well-being, address personal concerns, and just acknowledge the emotional toll that change can take.
Showing you actually care about the human side of it.
Precisely.
And once that support is in place, how do you keep the momentum going? Motivation must be key.
Absolutely. As one source wisely put it, the only time people change is when they want to. So leaders need to create a compelling reason for the change, a clear vision, and often a genuine sense of urgency.
Make it feel necessary and desirable.
Yes. And then it's vital to celebrate short-term successes and milestones along the way. Recognize the effort, reward progress.
Those small wins.
Exactly. They keep employees motivated, they reinforce the new positive behaviors, and they build that crucial momentum and commitment. Seeing progress makes the effort feel worthwhile.
Yeah, seeing those wins really fuels continued effort. Now, for those big, complex organizational shifts, how do you manage the process systematically?
Good question. A practical tool many organizations use is Kurt Lewin's force field analysis.
Force field analysis, okay.
It sounds technical, but it's quite straightforward. You essentially list all the driving forces, the factors pushing for the change, and all the restraining forces, the factors resisting it.
Pros and cons, basically.
Sort of, but more dynamic. You then try to score their relative strength. If the restraining forces are strong, or even just balancing out the drivers, you create an action plan.
What kind of plan?
A plan specifically aimed at strengthening the driving forces and systematically weakening or removing the restraining forces. It helps make decisions more sound, transparent, and data-driven, or at least systematically thought through.
Okay, that sounds useful. And I imagine leaders can't just launch the change and walk away. They need to ensure it sticks.
Absolutely. They have to stay vigilant. They need to empower their change teams to identify and overcome problems that inevitably pop up during implementation.
Like an employee struggling or a system glitch.
Exactly. This requires ongoing support training, mentoring, coaching. Ultimately, leaders must champion the change relentlessly and ensure its sustainability until it becomes the new normal, the new culture, the new habit.
It's a long-term commitment.
It has to be.
You know, it's interesting. We often frame resistance as purely negative, something to be overcome or squashed. But some of the sources suggest, well, something different.
That's a crucial insight and one I really appreciate. Resistance isn't always negative. It doesn't always mean someone is just being difficult.
What else could it be?
It can be legitimate feedback. It could be a sign of loyalty to something that works well. It can even be a valuable resource for improving the quality and clarity of the change objectives themselves. Maybe the resistance is highlighting a real flaw in the plan.
So listening to resistance could actually make the change better.
Potentially, yes. The sources delve into different ways leaders interpret resistance, maybe seeing it initially as a rational opinion or a deeply held conviction.
Okay.
But then there's the emotional side, seeing it as psychological reaction, like fear or anxiety. Or even sometimes dismissively as just a fixed personality trait.
And how a leader interprets it really matters, right?
Absolutely, because their interpretation dictates how they respond. If they see it as a valid opinion, they might engage in dialogue. If they see it as just a personality flaw.
They might just try to remove the person or ignore them.
Exactly. The risk is shifting too quickly from seeing resistance as potentially valid opinion or conviction to seeing it as purely emotional or irrational psychological reaction or a personality trait, especially when feeling frustrated.
But the goal should be to lean into understanding the why behind the resistance first, before jumping to conclusions.
That's the ideal, yes. There might be a crucial message, a valuable insight hiding within that resistance. Understanding it could make the change stronger, more robust, more sustainable in the long run.
So bringing this all together, what does this mean for you, our listener, whether you're navigating personal change or leading a team through a big shift?
Well, the key takeaway, I think, is that change resistance is fundamental. It's part of human psychology. It's part of how organizations work. It's rooted in our biology, our fears, our habits, our values.
But, and this is the important part, it is not an insurmountable barrier. Understanding its roots, from that amygdala fear response we talked about to those deeply held values, that's the critical first step.
The real power, though, lies in shifting your approach to change. It's about leading with empathy, fostering open dialogue, genuinely involving the people affected, and providing real, tangible support.
When you do that, you can start to transform resistance. It stops being just an obstacle and can become a source of valuable feedback, maybe even collective strength.
Exactly.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. What if the resistance you encounter isn't simply a problem to be crushed, but actually a crucial message waiting to be understood? What insights might you be missing right now? And what stronger, more resilient future could you build for yourself or your team by listening more deeply to the psychology of change?